Let's go Ravens! Fans are eager to know what Eric DeCosta's next move is. The Baltimore Ravens have made some major changes this offseason, but the question remains, what's next? The initial waves of free agency have stabilized, and while the Ravens have retained key players like Ronnie Stanley and Pat Rickard and added new faces like DeAndre Hopkins and Cooper Rush, there are still holes to fill. Ravens fans are eager to know, what's next for Baltimore? Many fans are calling for the addition of Justin Simmons. If you agree with this, hit the like button. If possible, comment below with your thoughts on this and who would be a big deal to join the Baltimore Ravens. One of the biggest concerns right now is the cornerback position. Brandon Stevens' departure to the New York Jets has left a glaring hole in the secondary, and while the team still has Marlon Humphrey, he usually thrives in the slot. Nate Wiggins has the versatility to play both inside and outside, but beyond those two, the Ravens have more questions than answers. Could this be the year TJ Tampa makes a leap? His slow 40 time hurt his draft stock, but Baltimore loves his versatility. Then there's Jalen Armour-Davis, a player the Ravens have kept despite his injury struggles. But can they really trust him? It seems unlikely. That leaves the question, do the Ravens look to free agency? And if so, who's available? One name that stands out is Tre'Davious White. Baltimore traded for White last season, and while injuries kept him sidelined for a bit, when he was on the field, he looked the part. Ravens fans were left wondering why he wasn't used more, especially when Brandon Stevens struggled. Given his familiarity with Baltimore's defensive system, White would be an easy fit. Other available options include Asante Samuel Jr., Rasul Douglas, and the veteran Stephon Gilmore, who, despite his age, still has something left in the tank. Even Joe Bawuzi, who was recently cut, could be a viable addition. With the market cooling down and prices dropping, now might be the perfect time for Baltimore to strike. But cornerback isn't the only position of concern. The Ravens could use help at edge rusher. Last season, Odafe recorded 10 sacks, and Kyle Van Noy added 12.5. But beyond them, the depth chart is filled with question marks. David Ohabo is entering the final year of his contract, and due to injuries, his time in Baltimore has flown by with minimal impact. Adisa Isaac and Tavius Robinson both have potential, but are they ready to take on bigger roles? Baltimore has a history of bringing back former players, and two familiar faces remain available, Matt Judon and Zadarius Smith. Judon has been a force in New England, and Smith has bounced around the league, proving he can still produce at a high level. If Baltimore were to bring one of them back, it would provide instant veteran leadership and production. However, it's also possible that the Ravens look to the draft for a young, explosive pass rusher who can contribute immediately while also being a long-term solution. One thing is clear, Baltimore needs a consistent game wrecker on the edge. The AFC North is loaded with dominant pass rushers, Myles Garrett in Cleveland, Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati, and TJ Watt in Pittsburgh. The Ravens are the only team in the division without that one elite disruptor. Owa and Van Noy are solid, but Baltimore needs someone who can take over games, especially in the playoffs. Another potential need? The interior offensive line. While the Ravens recently re-signed Ben Cleveland, it feels more like an insurance move than a solution. The team could still look to bring in additional help through free agency, with names like Brandon Scherf, Tevin Jenkins, and Shaq Mason all available. Depth on the offensive line is crucial, and Baltimore knows firsthand how quickly injuries can derail a season. But what about the draft? The Ravens hold 11 picks, and history tells us they aren't afraid to use them all. Some believe Baltimore could even trade tight end Mark Andrews for additional assets. While the team picked up his option, there's still speculation about his long-term future. If Baltimore were to trade Andrews, it would be a shocking move, but one that could bring back valuable draft capital. Then there's the backup quarterback situation. Some Ravens fans were shocked at the signing of Cooper Rush, questioning why Baltimore would spend significant money on a backup. But in a league where injuries to starting quarterbacks can make or break a season, having a capable backup is crucial. The Ravens learned this the hard way in past seasons, and they're not willing to take any risks. The running back room is another interesting topic. Derrick Henry is the clear-cut starter, with Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell providing depth. But what about J.K. Dobbins? He's currently a free agent, and some fans have wondered whether Baltimore would consider bringing him back on a one-year deal. The problem? There's simply no room. The Ravens struggled to find a role for Keaton Mitchell last season, so adding Dobbins back into the mix would only complicate things further. As for the defense, one name to keep an eye on is Justin Simmons. The veteran safety would be a major addition to Baltimore Baltimore's secondary, bringing leadership and playmaking ability. Meanwhile, there's still uncertainty surrounding Darius Washington. The Ravens have until April 18th to decide whether to match any offer sheets he receives. If he stays, he could be a key piece in the secondary. If he leaves, it's another hole to fill. Ultimately, the Ravens have several directions they can go. Free agency still holds valuable options, but the draft will be crucial. Baltimore must decide whether to focus on immediate needs or plan for the future. One thing is certain, the Baltimore Ravens aren't done yet. While they've made key moves, including the additions of DeAndre Hopkins and Cooper Rush, there are still questions left unanswered. The team's approach to free agency and the upcoming NFL draft will define their ability to compete in an increasingly stacked AFC North. Let's go back to the edge rusher situation because this is where things get really interesting. The Ravens have been known for their ability to develop pass rushers, but let's be real, Baltimore hasn't had a truly dominant, game-wrecking edge presence in a long time. They've had solid contributors, but no one who puts fear into opposing quarterbacks the way Myles Garrett does in Cleveland or TJ Watt does in Pittsburgh. If there was ever a time to go after that elite presence, it's now. The challenge? Those types of players don't just appear in free agency for cheap. That's why names like Matt Judon and Zadarius Smith keep coming up. They're proven. They know Baltimore's system, and they've shown they can be productive. But is bringing them back enough? Or do the Ravens need to go all in on an elite draft prospect? If Baltimore does choose to go the draft route, they need a guy who is ready to contribute immediately, not a developmental project. The last thing they want is to draft an edge rusher who sits for 2 years before making an impact. And given how deep this year's draft class is for pass rushers, the Ravens could be in prime position to land a future star. Another area that can't be ignored is the offensive line. The Ravens love to control the game through their rushing attack, but if the line isn't dominant, the offense won't function at its best. The team re-signed Ben Cleveland, but as we discussed earlier, that feels more like a fallback option rather than a true solution. The front office knows that offensive line depth is critical, especially with a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who needs protection and lanes to make plays. One of the most intriguing parts of this offseason has been the discussion around Mark Andrews. There's a growing debate among fans. Will Andrews remain a Raven long-term? The team did pick up his option, which on the surface signals that they plan to keep him, but some remain skeptical. If another team were to come in with an aggressive trade offer, would the Ravens consider moving on? It seems unlikely, but the uncertainty is still there. And if Andrews were to be traded, what would that mean for the offense? Baltimore already has Isaiah Likely, who has shown flashes of being a starting caliber tight end, but moving on from a proven star like Andrews would be a major shakeup. Still, as we've seen in the past, the Ravens are never afraid to make bold moves if they believe it benefits the long-term future of the team. Let's also talk about the wide receiver room for a second. The addition of DeAndre Hopkins is massive, giving Lamar Jackson a true number one target. But behind him, questions still remain. Rashad Bateman has shown flashes but has struggled with consistency and injuries. Zay Flowers had a promising rookie season and will be expected to take another step forward. But is this group enough? Or do the Ravens need another veteran presence to solidify the receiving core? So, Ravens flock, I need to hear from you. What do you think is the team's next move? Should they prioritize adding a pass rusher, or is cornerback the bigger need? Do you believe Mark Andrews is safe, or is there still a chance he gets moved? And what are your thoughts on the wide receiver room? Should Baltimore add another veteran, or are they set with Hopkins, Bateman, and Flowers? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's talk about it.